Elise, I thought maybe the best way to get started today is for you to share kind of what the definition is. A shorthand that occurs to me is kind of the notion of CSR, or corporate social responsibility for procurement, but I'm sure that's a gross oversimplification. So to start our dialogue, it might be helpful for you to give a little bit of background on yourself and the whole concept around responsible procurement.
Yes. I'm Alice Hemmingsen, and I'm based in Denmark, and I've been running my consultancy or thought leadership for the last 4 years. And I started out writing a book about responsible procurement, and now it's been converted into 5 smaller ebooks, which have been downloaded in 30 countries in about 1,000 people. And one of the ways that I get my knowledge is basically by really networking around the world, and also writing articles and blog posts and getting comments and followers. So I have a huge global presence and network as well. And one of the ways that I consider or I define responsible procurement is practically being something which is not only about compliance, but also about actionable approaches which can create a competitive impact and difference. And it's not only talking about the social impact, but also both the environmental and the economic impact that I'm considering. So what I'm usually asking the CPOs that I'm dealing with is, okay, so what kind of footprint are you having now, and what should it be in the future? And based on that and the DNA of the company, how can we actually work with that approach and create true value?
Excellent. Sorry, this is Richard. I just thought then let's maybe have a chance for our panelists each to introduce themselves, and maybe, as you say, you get a lot of your content and input based on networking and getting feedback. So we'll have a chance for each to kind of comment on how they see responsible procurement, corporate social responsibility in their environment. So Tracy, maybe we could start with you, leading procurement at the JCPenny, a major retailer. I'm sure the whole notion of corporate social responsibility, sustainability, managing supply risk, those things are very pertinent in your business.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we take corporate responsibility and procurement very seriously. So I really view it, Suzanne and Richard and Elise and Tony, as really fourfold. So we have the sustainability component, and we do have a gentleman that leads that, but we have an executive steering committee. So he presents out to our executive steering committee across JCPenney. I'm a member of that committee once a quarter. And of course, we're members of various coalitions, which helps because, as you guys are probably familiar in the space, you don't get a lot of resources to always focus on this. And so we have one resource lead for supplier diversity, one for sustainability, and a director of human rights. And then also a whole SRM team that looks at supplier risk management and relationship management. So we are part of various coalitions. I partner with Kim Mangone, who leads our global sourcing team. I, of course, lead the $4 billion in NFR, but we do have actionable goals together that we're trying to achieve for sustainability, some of which include the carbon emissions and things of that nature. So we do have a success criteria that we're trying to get to. And the more you dig into this, I notice revenue. It's about reputation, and obviously managing risk is critical, and doing the right thing for the world, our employees, and the company. But it's also very revenue generating because there's a lot of customers out there that care about this. So if you match your strategy with your customer base, you will see a revenue increase, especially with millennials. I think the statistic I always hear is that 51% of them will buy more will pay more for sustainable products. We did have a situation, and I'm assuming like we're under NDA, Richard, is that correct? Or this is all confidential between the panelists today?
Confidential, sure.
Yeah, so, I mean, we did have a situation, and Elise, you're probably familiar with the Saks Fifth Avenue situation that happened to them a few years ago. I got a call one day from our Director of Human Rights. He's in New York, and we do have a Director of Human Rights, and we do deep dive audits on our factories overseas to make sure that they're complying, that there's obviously no child labor issues, no prison labor. We did get a note in a Sephora bag probably 3 or 4 months ago that alleged that there was a product, the bag, was being made by a prisoner, a Chinese prisoner. So, of course, we dug into it within 24 hours. We dug into this because the same situation happened at Saks Fifth Avenue. I believe about maybe, at least you probably know the data better, like 3 to 5 years ago. Their issue was real. When Anthony did the deep dive audit on ours, we found out it was fake. It was not a real note. However, we did take it very seriously, and we got the Sephora, within JCP, we got their head of PR involved, their legal involved, and their and our human rights person involved, to do this very, very, not a normal audit, but a deep dive audit of the factories of that bag manufacturer to make sure, that there was transparency, because, people can be delegating their suppliers can be outsourcing to different third parties, and if you lose visibility to that, you lose control and visibility to some of the ethics that should be going on. And again, fortunately, it turned out to be a non-issue, but we do take it very seriously, and we do have resources against, both the human rights, the sustainability, supplier diversity, and supplier risk management, because there's just obviously with the data privacy issues going on with retail, that's also a key component that JCPenney is focusing on, and making sure that we have both encryption, but also policies and procedures around where our data goes. So I don't know if that helps and what other people.
Thank you very much, Tracy. So it sounds like a very comprehensive approach, and one in which you both protect the brand, kind of protect against downside risk, but you're also seeing that good business practice can equal good business at the top line.
Correct.
Well, right? Okay, very
correct.
So Tony Hall runs the procurement operation for the state of Missouri University System and Healthcare. And Tony, maybe would appreciate it if you had a chance to introduce yourself and share your perspective from the higher education vantage point.
Well, so I have 2 jobs. One is to supply end-to-end supply chain for a 3-hospital, 50-clinic, 400-physician health system, and then to provide front-end supply contracting and procurement for 4 campuses in Missouri. It's just short of $1 billion in activities. And they're 2 completely different models, but we run it out of one team, and we run all of our services as under contract. So with all the campuses, we have a memo of understanding as to what the deliverables are and what the measures of success are, whether you use the term key performance indicators or whatever slang term you use. We have those, and we have scorecards that we report on. The health system is the most highly regulated organization that we deal with, because we have Joint Commission and Medicare that we deal with, and many others, but those control our cash. Literally half or more of our basis for net revenue comes from Medicare and Medicaid, so they have a lot of say as to how we do business. We don't use the term responsible procurement. Today's the first time I've ever heard the term responsible procurement, and I think that we probably have programming around that. It's just not terminology that we use, but we have. I can tell you that sustainability is not a high-level objective at the university. It is gaining notice, and we do have hired a director of sustainability. The sustainability today is picking up plastic water bottles after our football game. So we have a long, long way to go organizationally. On the health system side, sustainability is receiving more attention because we have multiple teams that work on the introduction of products and processes and purchase services where we're starting to pay more attention to things like packaging, reprocessing, and things that are more readily available in that particular market where we have more experience as well. Diversity has never been a high visibility process here, but we have a new director of diversity that joined us from GE, and we're working with them to put together a meaningful program that even addresses Tier 1 spend, which is something we've really never enjoyed at the university or the health system. So we focused on Tier 2 and Tier 3 actually, and mostly in the construction arenas. Our customer base is really student enrollment. In the absence of students, we don't have a university. So our focus is around satisfying the student. And then our healthcare business is based on, what choices, and some consumers have very few choices because of their insurance coverages or lack thereof, where to get their healthcare services. So the healthcare consumer, is driven a lot by that coverage that they have and where they're allowed to go, and then their own personal ability to pay or not pay can drive them to us or away from us if they're trying to make informed decisions around that. So I don't know what all you want me to say about that. The things that, when I hear things like competitive advantage and corporate social responsibilities, and I think our job is to be good stewards of that which we're responsible for. We have a lot of regulations around, although we have sovereign immunity from the state, we do have a lot of requirements from a perspective of how we're allowed to do business. We have bid requirements and other things, so we look and act and smell like a state agency, although we receive little to no funding from the state anymore. So I'm trying to change the model to remove some of those restrictions so we can be better stewards. The president is charged with doing what's best for the organization, but our processes don't always allow us to end up with what's best. So the actionable things that we're doing is I wouldn't phrase it as developing competitive advantages. As I started to talk earlier for a couple people on the phone, we're really looking at transparency and looking at things like companies like Coca-Cola and others do that, healthcare and university setting is 15 and 25 years respectively behind industry from a perspective of forward-thinking processes and models of efficiency. So these types of topics are 25 years away from effectively being managed unless, you have social pressure to, in a particular community or governmental regulation that's going to force us to be more active in those areas.
But it sounds like, Tony, this is Richard again, sounds like to your point and to Tracy's earlier point, your key customers on the university side are those millennials, right? The students who are very attuned to social responsibility. So it sounds like it's an area that's growing in importance.
Well, the millennials are a portion of us, but we have over 80,000 students, and a very, very large number of those are not millennials.
Oh, okay.
People work on their master's degrees and online degrees and night schools and stuff,
Sure.
are not the 20-somethings or the early
good point.
late
Yeah,
teens.
they're lifelong
They're people
learners,
that are
right?
my age.
Yep, lifelong
So
learners.
we have a pretty broad mix.
Okay.
So it's an interesting, there's kind of a dichotomy in the approach that you take. For on-campus recruiting, yeah, you focus on the amenities and the things important to how millennials operate from a social, a social perspective, and then in other areas, you operate in the manner of what works best for someone who's working 70 hours a week that's required to get their master's degree to advance in their position.
Absolutely. Completely different perspective.
Completely different models.
Now, good point, Tony, and lots of good input for you, Elise. Let's get one more perspective. Suzanne Harris heads the procurement at First American Title. So I imagine there are some nuances and differences for a financial institution as regards the topic of responsible procurement. Suzanne?
I would have to tell you that I can't participate too much in the social responsibility or the sustainability discussion. We're very new, taking over corporate procurement, and we are partnering with our facilities group to do some of that, and I would actually need to catch up on what we've done. I think we've done actually very little in this way, and so I'm here to learn from you guys. But it brings to mind that, we're just trying to take on the addressable spend and get our metrics and promote our team and hire to develop corporate procurement at First American. So we're only really 2 years old in having corporate procurement. So we see sustainability and social responsibility and supplier diversity as things that we want to go grab those things, but we're very immature there.
Okay, well, so the timing of this session is perfect then, right, Suzanne, because you can start thinking about some of these concepts as you build that foundation.
Right.
So, Elise, I'd like to come back to you now. You've gotten three very different perspectives from different industries, and I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts about how does the feedback you've just received kind of mesh with what you're seeing in the market globally as in terms of best practices in this area?
Yes, sure. Let's come back to especially what Tracy started out with, because what I think you described, Tracy, was that really you are working with the supply diversity angle, also the risk angle, but very much about the compliance angle. And what I'm seeing globally is that people are moving a little bit away from that because it needs to be more impact driven. So what I'm seeing is that it gets more, for instance, product sustainability wise. Companies are working more with the life cycle efficiency of their products, challenging their suppliers on those components. But I'm also seeing that, for instance, the circular economy is building up. So a probably completely other picture than what you're seeing today. But again, I think, well, if we have to come back to also what Tony said, that this is not driven by compliance. It's just driven by customers. And I would say in an environment like you are in, Tony, I would say it might not be a competitive advantage now, but I see that many universities around the world are actually bringing sustainability into their environments because they see it as a way of attracting students. So
yeah, so that's half of my business, but the healthcare business, our customers are also our insurance carriers and Medicare.
Okay.
So they really could care less about our sustainability objectives and more about us getting people out the door, as it were, and spending a de minimis amount of money while providing a maximus level of care. So, and because they drive our revenue, we don't see our customer base as, on the healthcare side, as, you're right on the university comment first. people are asking us questions, and I think that's why we've hired a director, and I think we'll probably move it. But on the health system side, if we don't do it or we don't think of it or we don't invent it, the customer base is not asking for it.
One comment on that, because what I'm seeing as a trend is also that, as I said before, it's not compliance-driven, and sustainability doesn't necessarily need to be more expensive than what we have today. So one of the trends that I'm seeing as well is that even CPOs are seeing this as a possibility to actually bring in more sustainability with their suppliers, but also bring down the spend level.
So Elise, a follow-up question to you. You know, compliance tends to connote an overhead cost, something that you have to do. And what I'm reading into some of your insights are that, you know, a much more compelling argument to the C-suite is what is the upside? You know, what is the business case for focusing on procurement responsibility? So would you maybe comment on how people are framing this initiative in terms of what is the return on investment that can be gained, kind of that upside potential?
Yeah, I mean, just to start out by the framing, I would say that there's a lot of, you could say, audit fatigue going on in the market, and one of the upsides of actually turning it into a more impact-driven approach is that really, if you look at the return of investment, probably you will recognize this, Tracy, that you're probably using a lot of money and a lot of effort on actually documenting your suppliers. Yeah. And to some extent, of course, it's the return of investment is valid. But really, if you're looking at, you know, at the real work that's going on out there, I would question whether it really makes sense to keep on doing it that way. And I know that a lot of companies are questioning that at the moment. So not only are you saving money, but you are also looking at using sustainability to drive innovation. So for instance, if you take a trend like the circular procurement, it's really about creating or minimizing your risks, because at some point we'll not have resources enough to feed everyone. So it's also a way of, on one hand, building sustainability, but on the other hand, also saving the company.
Right. Yeah, and I think you'll notice a trend, Elise, and I think I've heard Suzanne say it, and I think you've heard Tony say it. It's really tough for CPOs, and Suzanne and I just came back from a ProcureCon. So we talked to a number of our colleagues there, and we talked not a lot on this subject, but it really comes down to resources and focus, and we're so busy on trying to create a world-class procurement organization, which I know this is a part of, but we really struggle with the resources and time it takes to do a supplier diversity and supplier sustainability program. And so to take this to several notches of what we need to do, I think all of us CEOs across the procurement are struggling with no, how do you consult and where do you spend your time, because we all have so much limited time. I mean, would you guys agree, Suzanne and Tony, is a struggle for you as well?
It's a complete struggle, because everything, and unfortunately, there's so many things that we do, right? But let's face it, they're all looking for cost savings, you know? That's what they want to talk about, right? They want to talk about, you know, how you protected the company and how sustainability and supplier diversity, but really what they really care about is, you know, how much money did you save me? So I just had a discussion on headcount, and, you know, I have open rec and I'm getting ready to fill it. Well, what's this guy really going to do for us, you know? Like, how much money is he going to save us? So unfortunately, those things happen. My focus in the last year was actually vendor management office, because the FRB has been down our throat because we're in such low maturity on supplier relationship management. So we did open a headcount for vendor management. We created a band of volunteers, a steering committee, and we got executive approval. And we went and gathered all our supplier inventory worldwide, and then we tiered them in risk, 1, 2, and 3, and now we're going to go to the next step of that. So we're behind the curve from all you guys, I think. Because we're being pushed by regulators, that's what our focus is.
Thank you, Suzanne. And this is Richard again, just on a somewhat parochial note, as a technology provider in this space. It seems to me that in the discussion we're just having here, everyone's dealing with the fact that you may not have the ability to simply increase headcount
right.
to address these challenges. So clearly there's a role for technology, and looking at our own suite of source-to-pay solutions, things like supplier information management tools to make sure that supplier profiles and quality certifications and insurance are up to date on oftentimes thousands or tens of thousands of suppliers that you may have, or tools like supplier performance measurement to do collaboration, spend analytics to look at diverse spend with Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. So I'd like to get some perspective from the entire panel on what do you see of the role of technology in this particular endeavor?
First, I've never added a technology that didn't require me to increase staffing in some manner, so I'm in a decreasing staffing evolution and in need of technology to deal with some of the things that I can't apply people to, which then requires me to have functional leads or whatever term you would use to manage that technology internally. So it's not true to say that the technology replaces people. It replaces the approach that we take to try to deal with the issues at hand. So all the things you mentioned are valid and could be, and one of the things that I think I saw at a meeting or two ago that you guys were working on, I think in cooperation with Coca-Cola and one of your other customers, was something around this supplier accountability perspective. But what I saw at that time was based a lot around, still around spend analytics and reporting on spend and opportunities around those analytics. And while that's noble and that is beneficial, we've moved away from the traditional business review process. We actually don't allow them to occur in our organization anymore because sales tracings are limited to no value to us, and sales projections are limited to no value to us unless they have a value add from a perspective of total reduction in expense associated with the relationship. So we also have a number of regulatory issues for which we don't know how to manage around hundreds and or thousands of contracts that technology should be able to handle. I'll give a couple examples. In the healthcare setting, we're now required to determine whether or not we have physician ownership associated with the businesses that we do business with, not just for that which we contracted with, but even peripherally. And if there's physician ownership, then we have to determine if there's a conflict with that ownership because we're in the healthcare business. So that's something that there's really, there are e-compliance tools so we can check our local physician population, but I can't check a national population for that. And I can give you 3 or 4 examples of that. So it moves beyond the data that we collect today, that technology can be developed to report back to us around where we have opportunities and measuring diversity and identifying opportunities for diversity, or measuring, identifying opportunities for sustainability, and all those things are nice, but I can send my CEO and CFO to jail and we can lose $350 million in revenue if I sign a contract to lease a space to a physician-owned company that I didn't discover and they start doing business with us as an organization, for every day they do business, we're going to get about $1 million in penalties. So,
right. So back to the compliance aspect, right?
So compliance is really, and we already have a number of things. We have to vet every person that walks in the building against OIG sanctions. We technically have to vet everybody that works for the companies we do business with for OIG sanctions. And if any of their employees are sanctioned, they either have to be removed from the organization or we have to cease doing business immediately with them.
Sure.
In the healthcare environment, this is not a commodity-based purchasing world. We have companies that have one-off product lines for which they're the only manufacturer. So this can create significant issues, but it's our responsibility to discover. So tracking insurance certificates and the validity of and all those things, awesome tool. But if you don't throw in OIG and some of those other things and compliance from a conflict of interest perspective, they're still very limited value to us.
Okay. So great examples, great examples, Tony, and certainly that complexity does argue that technology needs to be part of the solution. But Elise, I'm sure, you know, in the limited time we have left, one of the things that the audience might want to think about is, as you advise organizations, maybe that are just starting to put in place some of this infrastructure, you know, what do you recommend as an approach, how they incorporate not only technology but process, finding the right skills, because anytime the solution is going to have to include people, process, and technology, right?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I would recommend 3 things, and I think some of it we've also heard today, that one of the first things I would start considering would be, you know, the ambitions. Where should your ambitions lead you to? And of course, comparing to best practice. Because what I'm seeing in the market is that a lot of companies get stuck in the resource complexity and also, of course, other demands within procurement that are playing a much bigger role. So if you have to transform your procurement department and make it more sustainable, what reasons will you have to put in place in order to really create a transition which is also which has a bottom line impact? So that's the first advice. And the second is really understanding the impact or expectations of your stakeholders. We see that clearly in the CSR field, and I'm not seeing it as clearly in the procurement department that the use of stakeholders and their knowledge and also their opinion about what procurement should really do, that is, you know, part of the process of building the business case. So make sure you involve your stakeholders. And then, least but not last, talk to and involve your suppliers in the process, because they do play a key part of this transition. Without them, I guess the workload and the resource constraints are much bigger. So those are the 3 components that I would start considering from the beginning and before building the business case.
Excellent. Thanks, Elise. And, you know, I realize we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to make sure each of our panelists have a chance to share any concluding thoughts or perhaps questions for Elise. So, Tracy, as you've taken all this in, any words of wisdom to sum up your perspective?
Well, Elise, I appreciate. I like where you're going, and I think you hit on the 3 things really well. I do want to answer the question really quick on resources, and I would like to get Elise's and the rest of the panel's perspective. So we're using a tool, our sourcing tool, creatively to actually survey our tier 1 suppliers. So what we're doing is we're asking 10 questions to our supply base. We'll be sending it out to about 200 suppliers, and the results will be back in a couple weeks, and then we'll digest those results. But 2 of the questions will be on sustainability, 2 will be on supplier diversity, and then several others will be on supplier relationship and risk management. when we get those results back, it's a lot of data, but given it's gone through our sourcing tool, it will be very easy to digest. So again, these are their tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. Once we get that data back, what we're going to do with that data is say, okay, who's ever hitting it on all scorecards from suppliers, like what Elise was saying, if some suppliers are just hitting it out of the park on sustainability and diversity and the risk components, we're going to deem those top 5 suppliers as our strategic suppliers. And we're going to invite them in for innovation days and figure out how to innovate. So what Elise is saying is get your suppliers involved. That's what we're going to be doing from that perspective. In addition, if there's any at risk, we're going to go in and do some deep dive audits on those that are at risk.
Okay, so you're surveying your supply base as one key. And in particular, you're not trying to, you may have thousands of suppliers. I don't know offhand. I'm guessing you probably do. But you've targeted the top tier suppliers.
Correct.
For this effort, right? Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, Suzanne, I wanted to come back to you as well because you kind of said at the outset you're just starting to build this capability or infrastructure as you build the procurement process and organization overall. So I wanted to make sure you had a chance to get any questions that you may have from the other panelists, including Elise, on what best practices you should be looking for.
Well, I guess my question would be, what's the first thing you would recommend I do? What's the low-hanging fruit? What's the big bang that I should be looking for?
Great question. Elise, your thoughts?
The first thing I think you should be looking for is definitely getting your management team on board and really finding out what the responsible procurement target should be and how it should be linked to the overall business objectives.
So, Elise, does that include
energy or paper or like when you say targets, what the target should be? Could you give me like 2 examples of a target?
If you could be looking at it from, I would say, one of the slides that was shown in the beginning. I mean, is your target about reputation? Is it about revenue? Or is it more about savings? Or is it all 3 in combination? And what should the correct DNA or with? What is the DNA of your company, and what kind of journey should you approach on? I mean, I think it's essential to also look at your DNA. Not what I'm trying to say is really that it doesn't really fit to all companies to start building a responsible approach from a risk perspective.
Right. Well, being in the title insurance company, title insurance in the United States, yes. But First American has been sliced in half in the last, since 2008, right? So, we had 30,000 employees and we dropped down to 10,000 employees. So as we are, we moved into a refinance market versus a new home purchasing market, refinancing being only half the revenue that new home sales are for the company. So we've had this huge flip-flop in the company, and we've had this huge reductions, and we, scale up and then scale back, and then we have very cyclical. It's most of our sales are in the second quarter and third quarter, fourth quarter and first quarter very low. So we have a lot of temp labor, and we're always scaling up and down. So the company has really been focused on reducing expense and also trying to promote our reputation and increase our market share. So, managing expenses is number one thing. They are only starting now to recognize that purchasing is delivering cost savings to them. And I think they care about that we're doing risk mitigation, but not so much, right? They're really looking at that return on investment dollar. So, we're delivering big time on that. So I liked it that you said reputation, revenue, and savings, and I would say we're all 3, right? So our reputation is very important to us because of what we do, title insurance company. We have a bank and a trust, and so we're managed by the Federal Reserve Bank and the CFPB and Consumer Protection, and that's getting stronger, right? That's not getting weaker. Ever since 2008, Frank Dodd laws came in, And the laws were there, but now they're really starting to enforce, and you're starting to see in the news where banks, not that we are a bank, but we have a bank, but banks are getting fined, and it's hurting their reputation, right? They're making them put it on their website that they were fined for tax, whatever the issue is. So reputation is a big deal. We do spend millions and millions of dollars on paper because we have so many paper transactions, and along with that is a lot of money on shipping and freight because we're shipping documents back and forth. And I just really think that when we get to electronic signature, we will reduce all of that, and that will help our sustainability.
So thank you, Suzanne. It certainly sounds like, back to the point of what's in your DNA, a business case is going to be central to your approach. I might have guessed that, being a financial institution, but certainly you include all the aspects of the benefits that come from this, some of them being more intangible, but certainly sounds like a real hard dollar return on investment needs to be part of it, part of the equation in your situation as well. So great dialogue today. I really regret having to be the one to say we're out of time, as we do appreciate everyone's time commitment, taking time out of their busy days today. So I want to thank all the panelists. You know, this is a pleasure for Zycus to host such thought leaders in this discussion, and hopefully we've also created a small network here where I'm sure, Elise, if our panelists have additional questions for you, you'd be glad to follow up and respond. And I know you'll be making your thought leadership content available through your website.
Sure. I've just posted a blog post in the chat section about what I wanted to say today, so hopefully some of it got through.
Absolutely. So I wanted to thank everyone. Thank you, Elise, Tracy, Tony, and Suzanne. Thanks so much for your participation and sharing your insights.